In place of your shame, he's talking to Jerusalem, you will have a double portion. In a place of disgrace, they will rejoice over their share. So they will possess double in their land, and eternal joy will be theirs. For I, the Lord, love justice. I hate robbery and injustice. I will faithfully reward my people and make a permanent covenant with them. Their descendants will be known among the nations, and their posterity among the peoples. All who see them will recognize that they are a people that the Lord has blessed. I rejoice greatly in the Lord. I exalt in my God, for he has clothed me with the garments of salvation and wrapped me in a robe of righteousness, as a groom wears a turban, and as a bride adorns herself with her jewels. For as the earth produces its growth, and as a garden enables what is sown to spring up, so the Lord God will cause righteousness and praise to spring up before all the nations. That is super positive. That's not where this book started. Isaiah starts with him saying, you've done wrong. Judgment is coming. You failed to believe me. Assyria is going to come, and Assyria is going to cause trouble. Assyria is going to take the 10 northern tribes. And then a few years later, Babylon's going to show up and do the rest. The book doesn't end that way. The book ends with Isaiah talking about something else that's coming. We're going to focus a little bit on that this morning. They don't make things like they used to, right? Yeah, you say that about your cars, you say that about your clothes, right? They don't make things like they used to. How many of you know who this guy is? You know who that guy is? Some of you are probably too young. I grew up with this guy on our TVs, especially in the fall during football season. The Maytag guy. In fact, I looked it up. There's actually a new version of this guy. I'd never seen him before. But apparently there's still a Maytag salesman out there, or a repairman out there. He travels and he sells Maytags. They're owned by Whirlpool now. But what's funny is, you see how lonely this guy is? That was the point. The Maytags were, again, the line was, the Maytags were just so good. Those washers and dryers were so good that the repairman would get lonely. In fact, one of the most famous commercials was the Christmas one, where he's sleeping at Christmas time. Nobody's giving him a call because all the Maytags work, right? The funny thing is, they had to retire this guy in the 2000s. You get to the late 90s and 2000s, if you know anything about the history of Maytag, over the years, became less and less dependable. In fact, there was a lawsuit. There was a lawsuit in the early 2000s against Maytag not being able to deliver on all of its promises. And eventually they were bought out by Whirlpool because things just got so bad. And they aren't like they used to. They don't work like they used to, or they don't make things like they used to. He used to be the guy that was saying, hey, we've got a product that is different. But you know what? It isn't. It wasn't. Even Maytags break down. Companies call this, by the way, there's this fancy term called planned obsolescence. Things that are planned to go obsolete. Things that are planned to break. Emily and I grew up in a GM town, and the joke was, we all knew that our friends and our parents and everybody who was working at GM, they were making cars that were going to break in 3 or 4 years so they could keep their jobs. Right? Now, I'm only slightly exaggerating. It still happens, right? The latest iPhone comes out and it's obsolete within months. They always got the next product. They got the next one that they want you to buy. They got software that won't run on the last one. Got to buy the new one. Planned obsolescence. This is where we are in the book of Isaiah. Obsolescence. Things have been going downhill in Jerusalem for a very long time. You get to the end of Isaiah. Isaiah is probably a pretty old man by the time you get to Isaiah 61. He's probably in his early 70s. And he's seen it all. He saw the northern tribes just go downhill and they get wiped out. And he's lived through crisis after crisis in Jerusalem with the Israelites that remain in their kingdom. He has seen it all. It's only a matter of time before what happened to the north is going to happen to Jerusalem, because Babylon is coming. Jerusalem is old and broken, and they're going to experience some very, very hard times because of their unbelief and disobedience. But as I said, as we make our way toward the end of the book, Isaiah is looking ahead, and he sees light at the end of the tunnel. It's not always going to be this way. Things always aren't going to break and be obsolete. There's a new day coming, and we read this. We read some of this earlier. This is what he says in Isaiah 60. Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord shines over you. For look, darkness will cover the earth. That's what's coming. And total darkness the peoples. But the Lord is going to shine over you. His glory is going to appear over you. Nations will come to your light, and kings to your shining brightness. There's going to be darkness. It's going to get really, really dark. Not just for you, but the whole world. It's not going to last. There's going to be light. Someday it's going to be bright. There's going to be restoration. And Isaiah has the good news, which we also read earlier. In Isaiah 61, the Spirit of the Lord is on me. The Lord's anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, freedom to the prisoners, proclaiming the year of the Lord's favor. On and on and on he goes. He talks about beauty instead of ashes, festive oil instead of mourning, splendid clothes instead of despair. All that old stuff, all the broken stuff, all the bad stuff, it's going to get replaced. It's gonna have something new. There's going to be healing. There's going to be liberty. There's going to be freedom. There's going to be comfort. And the ashes are going to turn to beauty. He's painting a picture of, the bad stuff's here. The bad stuff is coming. But there is light of the tunnel. This is Isaiah's proclamation. There's going to be healing. But it's not simply going back to the glory days of Israel. They also need to hear this as well. If you're living in that situation, or if you're living in a bad situation, you're living in a crisis, what's one of the first thoughts that goes through your mind? Man, I wish it were yesterday, right? Man, we had it really good back, and then you start to fill in the blanks, right? We all do that, by the way. I think it's just part of human nature to do that. But Isaiah's not going to let us go there. It's not going to be just like those glory days. And they can think about the days of Hezekiah. They can think about the days of David, the days of Solomon. Those were great days. But Isaiah is pointing to something different. The future is going to be better than the past. How's it going to be better? So we're going to roll through some of these really quickly. First of all, the future is going to be perfect. He's using exceptional language to let us know and us to get the idea that the future is going to be perfect. It's going to be without flaw. There's going to be no sin. There's going to be no sickness. There's going to be no disease. There's going to be no imprisonment. There's going to be nothing but stability and peace. It's all going to be blessing. That's what's coming. God's going to make everything new, and it's not going to be like the old. But then there's also this. The future is going to be permanent. The future is going to be perfect. It's all going to be great. There's going to be no sin, no sickness, no death. That's going to stay. Again, unlike the past. Even the garden. Adam and Eve lost everything in the garden. The garden that's coming, they're going to lose it. no sin, no sickness, no death. Here's what Isaiah says again in Isaiah 60. The sun's no longer going to be your light by day. The brightness of the moon is not going to shine on you. Why? Because the Lord's going to be your everlasting light. God's going to be your splendor. Your sun's not going to set. Your moon's not going to fade. The Lord will be your everlasting light, and the days of your sorrow will be over. That's spectacular. That's what's coming. And he's painting this picture for Israel. This isn't going to be their immediate future. This is going to be sometime down the road. Their immediate future is pretty bad. But in the midst of all this doom and gloom, he wants them to see that their future is going to be perfect. Their future is going to be permanently perfect. Things will always be new. There's going to be no more of this things getting obsolete. We're never going to be saying they don't make things like they used to, because that won't be a problem in what's coming in the future. It's nothing like we've ever had. But then it's not going to be just for Jerusalem. Here's the other thing. The future is going to be for all nations. He's already said it more than once. He says this more than once through the back half of the book. He says this: nations are going to come to your light. This is going to be for all the nations. He says it over and over and over again. And you get the point. Anybody in Jerusalem is thinking, oh, hey, we're going to have this good. This future is going to be ours. No, this is going to be the future for the whole world. This perfect, this permanent future where nothing ever goes obsolete, where there is no sickness and no death and no disease and no evil. Again, presenting this picture to people who are facing all those things. It's not always going to be this way. But this great future that Isaiah is painting for Jerusalem isn't simply God waving a magic wand. We tend to talk about the future like this. He wants them to know that is not how it all goes down. Where God just shows up. I mean, how many of you want that in your lives right now? I do, right? I wish God would just show up and wave his magic wand over everything, right? Let's make it all peaceful and all beautiful. Well, that'd be great. Maybe the Bengals will always win, right? No, it does. Yes, God's like, what? It doesn't work this way. It doesn't work this way. The healing and the liberty and the peace and the no disease and the no sickness and all this stuff, it's going to be a little different. It's going to happen a little differently. It's not going to be God just showing up and just speaking it into existence. Here's what God says. Isaiah says. He was pierced because of our rebellion, crushed because of our iniquities. Punishment for our peace was on him, and we are healed by his wounds. As you follow the storyline of Isaiah, Isaiah is moving from Old Jerusalem to New Jerusalem, and in the middle of it all is this figure, this suffering servant. God's not going to wave a magic wand. No, God is going to show up himself, and he is going to suffer. He is going to be pierced. He's going to be crushed. He's going to be punished. And he's going to be wounded. That's how we get this future of no disease, no sin, and no evil. God doesn't simply wave a magic wand. No, he shows up and he goes through this in order to bring it about. See, Isaiah doesn't see goodness just showing up out of nowhere. There's a person who's going to show up and rescue his people. And mark my words, we forget this sometimes. There is no newness. There is no perfection. There is no permanence if we don't have this. It doesn't work this way. We have to have this. So Jesus arrives on the scene 700 years later. God shows up in a manger. You see, the future is a person who saves. It's precisely where Isaiah's dark tunnel is ending in the light. The tunnel's end is not just a bunch of pie-in-the-sky idealism. It's not just some fancy picture being painted of Isaiah of all the stuff that he wishes would happen. Now he sees that this one who was crushed, this suffering servant, this divine warrior, another figure here in Isaiah, this divine warrior is going to die. And in the process, he's going to save his people. He's going to save his people from the sickness, from the death, from sin, from evil. He is going to take all that judgment on himself so that there will never be judgment again on God's people. No more obsolescence. Things will always be new because of this person who saves. You see, Jesus shows up. He sees himself as that figure. We read it moments ago. The Spirit of the Lord is on me because he's anointed me to preach good news. Earlier, we read this in Isaiah. He's now quoting Isaiah. We think, Isaiah's talking about himself. And he is. The Lord's anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor, freedom to the end. He is. 700 years ago, Jesus shows up, gets Isaiah in the synagogue, and now he's saying, this is about me. I am here. He has appointed me to preach the good news to the poor. He sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to set free the oppressed. It's me. And he's not only here to preach the good news, he's here to become the good news. He's going to do it himself because we can't. This is something we can't do. This is something out of our league. It's impossible for us to rescue ourselves. So Jesus is showing up to heal, and he eventually heals and rescues and provides freedom by being the one who was crushed and pierced and wounded for us. Jesus himself is Isaiah's light at the end of the tunnel. There's a famous painting by an English Victorian painter. His name was Frank Dixie, an English painter in the late 19th century. His painting is called Two Crowns. In this painting, you see there's this king figure riding on a white horse, and you've got a parade going here. He's riding on this horse. It's an occasion for lots of celebration. Pomp and circumstance is what we call it, right? It looks like a coronation. He's been newly crowned. All the people here, they're happy. They're looking at the horse. They're looking at the king. They are in the midst of all this celebration. Do you see what the rider on the horse, the new king, his eyes, you can't see them, I know it's a bit distant. His eyes are not focused on all the stuff. In fact, he doesn't even have a smile on his face. His look is the look of shock. You see what he's looking at? To the right is a figure on a cross. Figure on a cross is there in the midst of all this celebration going on. And in a moment where this king is supposed to be celebrating, he's looking off to his left, off the side of the horse, and there's this cross, there's this person hanging on a cross with his own crown. The second crown. That's the other king in this picture. You see, that cross is speaking volumes about this celebration. And the king there is recognizing that none of this happens. The celebration, the coronation, the festivities, none of it happens unless there's this other king on a cross. This is what Isaiah has been talking about. You want this future where there's no sin, there's no pain, there's no suffering, there's no goodness. or lack of goodness. It's all good all the time. You want all that? Cross. The cross. In fact, I'm convinced the cross will always be all overlooking, even in our future, all of the festivities. When we enjoy all the benefits that Isaiah has outlined here, and we've only scratched the surface in a very short period of time of what he's saying in Isaiah 55 through 66. He talks about a new heavens and new earth. He's already talked about there being all light all the time and no darkness at all, no evil. You don't get that unless you have the cross. In fact, the cross is going to be present. Revelation gives us a figure of the one who's presiding over the new heavens and new earth being a sacrificed lamb. You see, this is Isaiah's entire book. Isaiah's entire book has been moving from the old Jerusalem to the new Jerusalem, and it runs through this figure who is punished. Because the new Jerusalem doesn't happen unless that happens. So that future that Isaiah talked about isn't just what's coming. It's also already not yet. Jesus died. Jesus came and he was the suffering servant. He was the divine warrior. He was the one who was punished for our sin. He was the one who was making it so that there will never be disease again in the future. He's the one who's bringing healing. He's the one who's releasing prisoners from all their captivity and all the stuff going on. But there's also hope for today. First of all, there's hope for today because we look around and we see everything. What is it that we see on our phones, screens, and our computer screens, and our TV screens? What is it that screens are showing us? They show us wars. They show us terrorism. They show us shootings. They show us all the bad stuff. The screens are loaded with bad news. And then we don't have to look at our screens. We've got stuff going on in our personal lives, right? We got dysfunction going on in our lives. Family hurt. We have personal setbacks. We have struggle. We have financial struggles. We have crises. Isaiah is inviting us, as we read Isaiah 61 and 60 and all the other chapters there at the end of the book, he is inviting us to see it's not always going to be like this. What is it that gives you hope in the midst of the mess? Well, the first thing is knowing that Jesus is going to make sure, he died to make sure that it's not always going to be this way. This is all going away. The pain's all going away eventually. Suffering is all going away eventually. That gives us hope. But there's also this. He also wants us to see that Jesus is already making all things new. He's already doing this in your lives. He's already made you his own. He's already given you this new life. The new life that you have in Jesus, that he has given you, is this life of no death, no sickness, no disease, no evil, no sin. We have it in the present. It's already started. Doesn't mean the circumstances have changed, but it's already happening in our lives. He's already made good on his promise to you. So even as we experience life in the mess, even as we see all that bad stuff on our screens, we can be assured, not only is it not always going to be this way, he's already started to make us new. He's already begun his new work in us. He's already with us. We are not the people that we are going to be, but Jesus has already begun to give us the life that we will have. The new starts now. So in the mess, Jesus is with you. He cares for you. He loves you. And he provides healing and rest, even in those moments. Those moments in which there's crises, there's anxiety, there's a lack of peace. Jesus brings peace. Why? Because that's the way it's going to be in the future all of the time. And it's not just for us. We said this moments ago, and I want to remind us all. The Lord has anointed me to bring good news and proclaim liberty to everyone. We do this, and Jesus did this in the synagogue. We're doing it right now. We proclaim. We bring good news. And it's all happening in this gathering. And it's not just for us, it's for the world. It's for the nations. The nations are here. You understand that when he talks about the nations, Jerusalem is like halfway around the world, right? Plus Fresnos, it's included. This is us. This is Jesus already making good on his promise. This is Isaiah's promise. The nations will come to the light. So we're here. Now, it doesn't look all that bright, right? Like, well, we need a little more candle power. No. The light is here. The light is here in Jesus. As Jesus makes good on his promise. It's not just for us. It's for the nations. And it has already started right now. The nations are here in this gathering. The nations are where we live, where we work, where we play, and where we learn. Our city, our community. We proclaim the good news. And we proclaim that Jesus has come to free the prisoners. We proclaim liberty. And we tell people it's not always going to be this way. Because Jesus is the tunnel's end. He's the light at the end of the tunnel. And he has come for all of us. In our misery, in our sickness, to give us his life and healing. Let's pray.